Who's Lila? A game that I only recently just found out about that has quickly grown to be one of my favorite horror games, if not my favorite horror game of all time. Now, with this game only releasing in February of this year, it's honestly understandable how it could have flown underneath most people's radars, including mine, but after playing through it fully, oh my god. To say that it's a crime that this game isn't a household name yet is honestly such a massive understatement. With its very unique game mechanics, like literally controlling the main character William's face, and you also get to solve ARG like puzzles, and lore so much deeper than you'd ever expect any indie game to really ever go. It's just honestly is insane how deep and detailed this game is, and with all of this said and done, you'd expect the community to be decently large and bustling with activity, but that just really isn't the case here. While there are instances of it picking up small amounts of traction for a point in time, with being featured on channels like Manly Badass Hero and The Game Theorist also doing a playthrough of it, that's honestly about the extent of it. There is no deeper dive type lore videos on it, and nothing really exploring the implications of its many endings, and even Reddit barely picked this game up on their radar with a subreddit of a mere 66 sub-members, and that was honestly the most surprising part to me. Now, evidently, this game has been left mostly untouched by the masses, and this just needs to change. And in this video, I hope to achieve and really just bring this game to the forefront and showing you why this game needs to have way more attention than it currently gets. Now, you start off this game by being greeted with a tutorial on how to work the game's main facial mechanic, which is what largely sets it apart from the mass amounts of other indie horror games. Now, this concept is done so incredibly well in this game that I'm honestly surprised that I don't know of any other games that actually have implemented something similar to this, because it makes each playthrough feel so alive. It also solves the problem of getting different endings in games feeling monotonous because of the many different routes you can actually take to get to each ending, rather than having to go one direct route with slight deviations. Now, the only slight downside of this mechanic that honestly isn't even a downside and is even fixable in game is that the game will actually fight you on some of your movements made to William's face in certain situations. However, this actually annoys you enough that you can just easily turn it off in the settings, which is an amazing addition that can enable so many people to get all the endings in the game, and actually makes it a lot easier to get each ending after you've gone through the game. Now, as previously mentioned, another amazing byproduct of this game's main feature being controlling how William reacts to situations is you get many different paths of dialogue in each area and in every situation you actually get yourself into. For example, even in the tutorial, you're able to react to certain prompts in different ways in order to get additional dialogue cues from William, further egging you on to go back and react in any possible way to each situation. Now, just another little interesting tidbit about this game, which is technically a mechanic, is the many different palettes you can actually obtain to change the color layout of the game itself, which actually make it very satisfying on the eyes, but past that it serves no real purpose, and you obtain these from just finding them throughout the game with little Easter eggs and whatnot. So now for the interesting part that you guys are probably going to be mostly interested in, the lore. Now, initially, by looking at the Steam page here, it just seems like it's about the disappearance of a Tanya Kennedy and you essentially covering up your tracks. But as the game progresses and you go on with the dialogue and getting different endings, it becomes a lot more than that. Now, the lore for this game is honestly mostly up for interpretation. However, I believe that its obscurity serves this game relatively well. And if you've played this game before, you very much know why I'm saying that. But for those of you who haven't, essentially what I mean, without giving any spoilers, is that the game gives you enough clues to where you can figure out a lot by yourself, and there's even certain portions of the game that answer specific questions you probably have and give a lot of context into what is actually fueling the game's narrative. Now, what I'm going to say next probably is going to seem very selfish at first. Hear me out. I believe the story and lore of this game is the one portion of this game that is mostly benefited from this game's relative obscurity, because not everyone is doing videos and speculating on its lore, and in fact, like I previously mentioned, I literally have not been able to find even one video on the game's lore at all. What I essentially mean by this is that, for example, everyone knows the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's due to game theory and channels like it that take deep dives into the lore of games, making videos on its lore and theorizing and speculating on it, and this allows for much of the theorizing and speculation to be up to the player whether they like it or not. And if you're watching this video, honestly, you're probably going to like speculating and theorizing, so you know, it's honestly a lot of fun. And again, while trying not to get too spoilery, but the lore of this game really makes a lot of references to the topics of mental health, psychological issues, while also having slight hints of supernatural and different interpretations of how people handle traumatic events. But while I say supernatural, that's honestly very, very loose, and like I said, a lot of this lore is up to interpretation, so some of this honestly is up for your sort of own opinion. Now, while on the surface this may sound like a very, very basic story for an indie horror game of this caliber, it very much explores these topics in ways that I have literally never seen or even thought of in a game or film. So you're never going to be short of things to speculate on, and you're probably going to be thrown for a lot of curveballs while playing this game. And even if you finish this game in its entirety like I have, you're still going to be left scratching your head and just completely clueless in some of the lore. So another major portion of this game's mechanics and its actual lore that I wanted to dedicate a whole part of this video to is the actual puzzles and clues that you have to siphon through in order to traverse to each ending. Now, while this is obviously very commonplace in many games like this, I specifically want to highlight the developers' use of ARG-like elements with the usage of a multitude of media outside the game itself to solve puzzles and getting different endings and answers to many questions in game about the lore. I seriously can't stress enough how well he uses this. So going along with the trend of this video, of course, I'm not going to give any spoilers here, especially because this is possibly this game's most interesting deviation from any other indie horror games ever, because I want to stress how well this feature is utilized while also being extremely satisfying and rewarding to solve on your own. Now, the usage of outside websites and accounts to get answers here is honestly just perfect because it doesn't really require an absolute mastermind to figure these out, but it also isn't easy, so you actually have to think about what you're doing and plan your approach to each clue and actually sort of use your brain to figure these things out, and that is what makes it so satisfying. So yeah, I seriously just can't stress enough how insanely well this game is made, and it's just honestly such a crime that this game isn't nearly as popular as many other indie horror titles. So to close out this video, I'm going to put the Steam link to this game in the description, and I'm also going to link all of the developers' socials as well. And also, thank you so much for staying to the end. If you're here, I cannot thank you enough, and if you consider subscribing to me, then I thank you so much. Basically what this channel is going to be, to give you a layout, is going to be me exploring internet mysteries, interesting games like this that I find to be somewhat creepy and the lore somewhat interesting, and real life cases and unsolved cases, just anything sort of creepy that I find interesting and think should be more put on a pedestal. And yeah, that's honestly about it. I will see you guys hopefully in the next one. Goodbye.